Whether it's the turning of water into wine or the parting of the Red Sea, there's one thing you can always count on when it comes to miracles. They always make us question reality. And in the tennis world, it's no different. These are the craziest miracle moments in tennis history. And first, we've got to kick things off with the greatest miracle in Wimbledon history, because this guy didn't just make an insane comeback, he practically rose from the tennis graveyard. If you're wondering who this guy is, we're talking about Jimmy Connors and his extraordinary victory over Sweden's Mikael Pernfors in the 4th round at Wimbledon back in 1987. Number 8. Jimmy Connors versus Mikael Pernfors. Now, it's no news that Connors' fighting spirit has always been legendary, but with this victory, Connors proved that he was in an absolute league of his own when it came to tennis legends. You see, Connors was getting schooled in the first 2 sets, and for most of the 3rd. Pernfors, on the other hand, was showcasing his jaw-dropping tennis wizardry with a whopping scoreline of 6-1, 6-1, and 4-1. Now, for most people, the scoreline alone would have been enough to throw them off balance. But for some reason, Connors was not backing down. Now, we're not sure if he was just embarrassed by the thought of such a humiliating defeat, or if it was the sound of the crowd cheering on the center court that gingered him. Whatever it was, one thing was crystal clear. Connors suddenly became a different person on the court. Because the tables did a 180-degree flip, and Connors clawed his way back from what seemed like an inevitable defeat, and shocked everyone by winning in 5 sets. We're talking about a 1-6, 1-6, 7-5, 6-4, 6-2 scoreline. Absolutely epic. But you know what's even more epic? Winning the tournament as a wild card. And that's exactly what Goran Ivanovich pulled off back in 2001. Number 7. Goran Ivanovich versus Patrick Rafter. Before that fateful day in 2001, Ivanovich had been to the Wimbledon final 3 good times, and all 3 times he had tasted the bitter sting of defeat. First, it was a surprising loss to Andre Agassi in 1992, then a not-so-surprising defeat to the tennis GOAT Pete Sampras in 1994, and in 1998, he lost to Pistol Pete once again. But fast forward to 2001, and everything was different in so many ways. For starters, Ivanovich wasn't even in the top ranks anymore. Just to add some context to it, he was ranked a humble 125th in the world. He even had to rely on a wildcard entry to qualify. So you can imagine the emotions he must have been wrestling with as he stepped onto the court for his 4th Wimbledon final. To make matters worse, his opponent was the 2-time US Open champion, Patrick Rafter. So no one really saw him as a serious contender. But Ivanovich? He certainly had other plans. Because in a nail-biting 5-set battle that had everyone on the edge of their seats, Ivanovich came out on top with a score of 6-3, 3-6, 6-3, 2-6, 9-7. Speaking of battles, Andre Agassi fought one of the toughest battles of his career back in 1999, and it's nothing short of a miracle that he managed to come out on top. Number 6. Andre Agassi versus Andre Medvedev. Andre Agassi's only French Open title came in 1999 when he beat his enemy Andre Medvedev in the final. But that's not the only thing that made this match stand out. What really made it such a big deal was the fact that Andre won the match by a literal miracle. Because Agassi found himself 2 sets down against Ukrainian Andre Medvedev. In fact, the first set was an absolute disaster. He lost it by a brutal score of 1-6. And to add insult to injury, it only took 19 minutes. The second set didn't fare much better, ending with a scoreline of 2-6. Now this is where the tennis magic kicked in, because what followed was one of the most dramatic tennis comebacks. Agassi won the next 3 sets 6-4, 6-3, 6-4. And by adding the Roland Garros title to his list of achievements, Agassi became the first player to complete a career Grand Slam since Rod Laver in 1969. He also became the first player to win the 4 majors on 4 different surfaces. Talk about breaking a record! And just like Agassi, Andy Murray's tennis miracle didn't just help him win a match, it also made him a record setter. Number 5. Fernando Verdasco versus Andy Murray. You see, Wimbledon always brings something spicy for the tennis fans, and the quarterfinals back in 2013 was certainly one to remember. On one side of the court, we had Andy Murray, fighting tooth and nail to end a 77-year drought by becoming the first British player to win Wimbledon in nearly 8 decades. And on the other side, Fernando Verdasco was chasing his own dream of bagging his first Grand Slam. Verdasco kicked off the match like a stallion and secured the first 2 sets 4-6, 3-6. The Spaniard was at the top of his game, until he wasn't. Murray pulled off a comeback so hard, it made everyone's jaws hit the floor, even Murray himself. Luckily for him, he would go on to win the tournament and become the first Brit to lift a Wimbledon trophy. Now, if we're being honest, we can't talk about Wimbledon miracles without talking about the time Richard Gasquet kept us on the edge of our seats when he defeated Andy Rodic at Wimbledon back in 2007. Number 4. Andy Rodic versus Richard Gasquet. Richard Gasquet's victory over the almighty Andy Rodic was nothing short of a tennis miracle. In fact, nobody expected Gasquet to come out on top, especially after he lost the first 2 sets. But not only did he manage to claw back and win the 3rd set in a nail-biting tiebreak, he also continued his incredible comeback to win the entire match. The most heart-pounding moment came in the 5th set, which ended with an incredibly intense tiebreaker with a scoreline of 4-6, 4-6, 7-6, 7-6, 8-6. Now, you're probably thinking that it's not such a big deal, because let's be real, the difference in their scores isn't as massive as the others. But you see, Gasquet wasn't exactly known for winning matches that stretched to 5 sets. So this victory definitely marked a significant turning point in his career. If you've been hooked to this video from the start, then by now you should know that Wimbledon is like the hub of electrifying comebacks. But just in case you're not quite convinced, then this next one should do the trick. Number 3. Venus Williams versus Lindsay Davenport. Back in 2005, Venus and Lindsay went head-to-head in the finals of Wimbledon women's singles, and it was one of the greatest showdowns in tennis history. Venus and Lindsay first crossed paths back in 2000, when the Williams sister was still on the rise, and you know that Prime Venus was always on fire. But by 2005, the tables had turned dramatically. Venus had slipped to number 16 in the rankings from number 1, and she hadn't reached a major tournament's final in 2 years. Davenport, on the other hand, was sitting at the number 1 spot like it was her birthright. She had even defeated Williams in their 4 last encounters, and at first it looked like she was going to extend that streak like a walk in the park. She set an insane pace and outplayed Venus to take the first set 6-4. In the second set, when Davenport broke Venus's serve at 5-5, it was crystal clear that Lindsay was going to go home with the trophy. Venus, however, had a different plan, because she summoned her best shots when it mattered most, broke back, and forced a 3rd set match that turned out to be the longest women's match in Wimbledon history. And the scoreline in the end? 4-6, 7-6, 9-7. Phew! Now that was pretty close, but certainly not as close as the showdown between Rafa and Federer back in 2017. Number 2. Roger Federer versus Rafael Nadal. Tennis fans were in for a treat during the golden age of the Roger Federer-Rafael Nadal rivalry, but ever since his last victory at Wimbledon in 2012. And to top it all off, he'd just taken a 6-month break off the court after his first surgery due to a surprise knee injury. He had basically been on a sabbatical while the tennis world carried on without him. You could say the stakes were higher than a mountain in Switzerland for the Swiss GOAT. So we kinda thought it would be pretty easy for Nadal. But remember what they say about miracles? They always catch us off guard. The very same way that Federer's comeback did. Down a break in the 5th set against his perennial rival Nadal, he pulled out all of the stops and managed to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat with a 6-4, 3-6, 6-1, 3-6, 6-3 win. This win marked his 18th Grand Slam title. But who would have thought that Federer himself would be on the receiving end of someone else's tennis miracle? And that's exactly why we saved it for the number 1 spot on this list. Number 1. Roger Federer vs. Novak Djokovic. Depending on who you ask, Federer is arguably the greatest player the tennis world has ever seen. But that didn't stop Djokovic from summoning the nerves of steel when it mattered most during the Wimbledon finals back in 2019. From blasting heavy shots to avoiding the errors at all cost, the entire match felt like Djokovic was walking on thin glass. But in the end, the Serbian managed to take the first ever Wimbledon men's singles final to a tiebreak at 12-12 and defeated Federer with a scoreline of 7-6, 1-6, 7-6, 4-6, 13-12. Even Djokovic couldn't help but admit that he only won the match because he had luck on his side. Now, if you don't think that's a miracle, then I don't know what is. So there you have it, folks. Which of these tennis miracle moments was your favorite? Let us know down in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to learn more interesting things about your favorite tennis players.